The odds are that the tool that you're mastering today is probably going to be obsolete within a couple of months at the pace that everything is going. So if we're all just sprint to keep up, we'll only focus on the latest shiny object and we'll never truly catch up because there's always a new AI tool, a new AI capability.
Welcome to the Emblazers Show, where B2B leaders are igniting revenue. I'm your host, Abby Kerr. And on today's episode, we're throwing it back again to Next Revenue Summit 2026 and a case study presented by Marcela Piñeros, Global Head of Sales Enablement at Stripe. The topic, AI in revenue growth, specifically as used in enablement. Everyone's talking about AI in revenue growth, but the data is sobering. While almost every company is experimenting with AI, more than half say they have yet to see measurable ROI. Well, Marcela is coming at that problem straight from the enablement seat, and today you will get to hear her story and Stripe's story. First, a little bit about Marcela. Marcela Piñeros is Global Head of Sales Enablement at Stripe, where she leads a worldwide organization focused on making internal teams and customers wildly successful. Before Stripe, she built and scaled the enablement function at New Relic, from senior instructional designer to VP of global enablement, after years of designing award-winning learning and performance programs for some of the world's biggest brands. Along the way, she's been recognized with industry honors like HighSpot's Innovation Impact Award and Sales Enablement Pro's Women Making an Impact in Enablement, and she co-authored a field guide to data-driven sales enablement. Today, you'll get to hear how that journey shapes the way she uses data, storytelling, and enablement as a true growth engine at Stripe. So let's dive in.
I brought you to the table to say, all right, here's what people got to do with AI now and what they might need to do next. And here's what that looks like, and here's what's happening, and here's how that's working. And so everybody who came thinking that next was primarily about AI, and in the first 3 or 4 presentations, you're like, okay, get ready. this is why you're here. So future-proofing your revenue team is the title. I think that when you say revenue team, just give me a sense of like, what's the scope of that? What will people be thinking about today when they hear revenue team?
Yeah, well, what I'm talking about really kind of applies to anyone that is an IC that is needing to use tech and needing to use AI in this coming wave. So it's going to be pretty broad, but I will spend much more time on enablement because that is what is dear to my heart. The impetus for all this was I spent a ton of time talking to folks and they kept just expressing anxiety about AI. And I've been just deep in the weeds, doing the best that I can. My team is phenomenal. For those of you that have had a chance to work with the people that I get the privilege to work with every day, you will know they are just like thought leaders in everything they do. So they've been dragging me along and really pulling the envelope forward into what we do with AI. And as I was doing it, I just kept getting more and more excited about it. And I would talk to other people that were just getting more and more anxious. And I was trying to figure out what the difference was and what the distinction was. And I think it was more of just the approach with which I was taking it led me to see the potential. And the anxiety that other people were feeling came from a very, very solid place of personal lived experience. So hopefully this chat helps kind of bridge the two.
All right. We're back to some presentation, which is great. I'm a big believer in visuals. I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Well, again, thank you to everybody for joining. Just a huge thank you. And I want to preface this by saying that everything that I'm going to share today is just my opinion, right? Like there is nothing in here that is probably rocket science or net new. It's just the way that I've been processing this world. You've probably heard people talk about how important it is to have an AI mindset. And I hear this all the time. But let's say you've got 2 people in front of you that have an AI mindset. How do you know which one, or actually just 2 people in front of you, one of them has an AI mindset. How do you know which one does? Like, what is it that they're doing differently? How are they behaving differently? And when I started asking this question, what I got from folks is that they were experimenting with tools, that they were just doing a lot of experimentation, which I think is a great part of the story, but it's probably only a portion of it. And actually, my thinking is that it's potentially our biggest distraction. Because if you think about it, the odds are that the tool that you're mastering today is probably going to be obsolete within a couple of months at the pace that everything is going. So if we're all just sprint to keep up, we'll only focus on the latest shiny object and we'll never truly catch up because there's always a new AI tool, a new AI capability. So my take is to actually stay ahead and to future-proof yourself, we need to pause from focusing on the tools and start thinking about the skills that help us be effective using those tools. So today, the thing that I'll talk through, I'll share with you 3 core principles that you can use to kind of pressure test your AI enablement strategy. And I'll also go into some concrete examples of what these skills could look like in practice in the context of enablement, going as far as to propose some future jobs in enablement that I think are probably headed our way. But let's start with some numbers. Tim, you're going to love this. Proper CVI fashion. I chose this because I think that these numbers perfectly reflect the whiplash of being in GTM at the rise of AI. The first one, according to McKinsey's latest State of AI report, 88% of organizations are regularly using AI in at least one business function. It's everywhere. And Gartner is projecting that by next year, 95% of all seller research workflows will start with AI. So those days for those of us that have been in sales of like stalking a prospect on LinkedIn and then working for 20 minutes to write an email, gone. But the recent B2B data is showing that 51% of organizations are implementing AI without seeing any measurable ROI. So we have massive adoption, massive expectations, and half of us are looking at the other half wondering, what are we missing? Like, are we just generating more mediocre work faster with the promise of AI? Shouldn't this be more immediately effective? What's going on? Well, my hypothesis is that we are missing the forest for the trees. Right now, it feels like a new AI tree is popping up every week, and we're exhausted from trying to keep up. And honestly, we're trying to find ROI in every single tree and getting lost in the forest. But if we stop looking at the tools and zoom out to look at the skills that we need, I think that that's going to get us a little bit further. So some of you may have heard of Gifford Pinchot. He, at the turn of the 20th century, was tasked with protecting American forests from clear cutting during the height of industrialization, which was another moment in time where everything started to happen really, really, really fast. And he was facing this massive workforce of loggers whose entire identity was tied to cutting down trees. And instead of eliminating all of those jobs, what he did was he reframed their roles entirely. So he founded the first school of forestry, and he taught them botany and ecology, turning that workforce into the first generation of U.S. forest rangers. So Pinchot realized that the core skills of forestry, management, and sustainability apply regardless of the tree that you're planting or cutting down. And I think that as GTM leaders, our job is to be the Gifford Pinchots of our era and upskill our people to see beyond the ROI of a specific tree and help them be the stewards of a human-first, agentic world. So this is the first principle for you, which is seeing the forest for the trees. The second principle is going back to a time where every elevator had a human operator. So did you know that the technology for automated push-button elevators existed since the early 1900s? But it's 1945 and buildings still weren't able to install them. Can anybody guess as to why you think the technology existed, but buildings were not in a position to install them? It's trust, people's fear of technology. Humans were absolutely terrified of getting into a metal box suspended in a dark metal shaft without a human operator in control. And when you think about it that way, it's pretty scary. So innovation was completely stymied by human anxiety. So what's changed? Well, they introduced trust mechanisms by keeping the human in the loop. This means having a giant red stop button that gives people control, having an emergency phone with a human on the other end, having mirrors, elevator music, even the voice to say like first floor, lobby, to replicate having a human in the space with you. They designed using human technology. And once people saw that there was still a human in the loop, they felt more confident in what they were doing by stepping into that box. And today, the large majority of folks will just step in, look at their phones, not even blink, and without a second thought, they're going to be in an elevator. And that is what has actually let us build skyscrapers today. So the way I think about it is folks are seeing this like open door of AI, feeling understandably hesitant. And I think it's on us to remind them that there is a giant red stop button and it's them. They are the humans that can validate outputs. The call button are the humans that can have demonstrated advanced empathy. And keep in mind also with trust and AI, like if folks keep seeing AI slop coming from AI tools, they're going to quickly start losing trust in them as well. So like the first elevators, AI needs stop buttons. And I think that that's our role here. So second principle, we win by keeping the humans in the loop. It's all about trust. Just to recap, principle number 1, seeing the forest for the trees. Principle number 2, keeping the human in the loop. So there is also a third principle here. And when I was thinking about mapping AI skills, I kept coming back to this one idea of what is the actual job to be done? Focusing on the core objective rather than the tools, it changes everything. So I went back to 1927, talkies hit Hollywood and the silent film world spiraled. Actors, musicians who were all panicking, thinking that their entire existence was tied to silent films. And then you've got this guy named Jack Foley, who instead of panicking, went back to the first principle of reflecting on what is his core job to be done. And it wasn't pantomiming on a silent set. It was about making the audience believe that the world on screen was real. So by shifting his focus, he didn't only adapt, he actually invented an entirely new field because microphones were fine, but they only picked up on dialogue. They missed crucial sounds like footsteps or clothes rustling. So Jack Foley and his crew started to perform sounds live, like snapping celery for bone breaks or shuffling shoes in gravel, training their timing in their ears to create this whole new profession of a Foley artist, which is a great example of core principle number 3. When technology shifts, the only way to evolve is by getting laser focused and really, really crisp on what the actual job to be done is. So see the forest for the trees, keep the human in the loop, and be clear on the job to be done. 3 core principles for you to think through as you are establishing how you're going to train your teams, your company on AI. Are you doing those 3 things? All right, let me move forward into the big question that's probably on everybody's mind is, well, what is our job to be done in enablement? And here is my take on the skills that an individual contributor needs to thrive in an agentic world. I see 6 main categories. So the first one is workflow architecture. It's not a can you write a great prompt world anymore. It's about designing for delegation, being clear on the vision, being clear on your non-goals, being able to break down tasks and sequence them for the best result. And it's where your years of lived experience and street smarts actually become the best part of the prompt. And I'll say, I don't know if many of you remember, I have this very firm recollection of once early in my career, I had the opportunity to have an intern come work with me. And I was so excited. And then it hit me that I needed to somehow codify what was in my head and put it on paper to hand to another human for them to do the work. And it was significantly harder than I expected. It was something that I had never really paused to ask myself, why am I doing things this way? Or after I do this step, what is the natural next step? You just kind of do the work. When you have to pause for a minute and break down the tasks and sequence them to make them most efficient, it's a different muscle. The next one, advanced empathy. It's our real world superpower. It's about building relationships IRL. AI can't feel the vibe in a meeting room. It can't catch nonverbal cues. It depends on us to give it that information. Humans are still the bridge between the data and the real world, making sense of what AI gives us. We've got output validation, having an editor's eyes. You aren't the writer anymore. You are the editor-in-chief. You're checking for bias, for logic gaps, for hallucinations, while making sure that everything still sounds on brand and still hits the right tone for your organization. Orchestration, coordinating the agents. And this is where I think it gets really fun because you're building workflows that span different systems and different teams. You're planning for how these things run on their own. But more importantly, you're planning for what happens when they get stuck, when they hit errors. You're coming up with exception handling. It's the idea of daisy chaining multiple factories together. Each one might operate successfully on its own, but can you do handoffs between them and keep the operations moving? Then we've got governance. Mitigation isn't flashy, but it's vital. ICs are going to need to track agent health, determine what makes the agent healthy. How do you know if an agent is going off the rails? Making sure that no personally identifiable information or confidential data leaks into public models. And knowing when a workflow has reached its end of life. We tend to be very good at starting new things, but rarely do we pause to think, okay, and how will I know when to wind this down and take it offline? And with agents, it's going to be that much more critical because if not, we're just going to end up with a zoo of a lot of agents out there, but nobody really governing them. I think for an IC, one of the big skills in governance is to think about how to be responsible stewards of the technology that we're building. And the last one is identity shift, shifting from an IC to an agent manager. We are moving past this idea of hours worked as a metric. Now it's about outcomes. It's about quality, about velocity. So you're essentially managing a digital workforce, documenting their workflows, but then also defining what of this workflow should be agentic, what should be human, and then being able to keep everything updated as the tech moves forward. If we take a look at all these skills, right, and what we know noticeably is not here, research, drafting emails, building basic docs, we are all generally using AI right now to do some of that heavy lifting. And so we're shifting, this gives us the opportunity to shift our focus back to what our real purpose is in enablement. And that's helping teams do the best work of their careers. And that is a massive shift for ICs, and expecting them to make that leap on their own is a recipe for burnout. Which takes me to the role of leadership in an agentic world. And to see the forest for the trees, my feeling is that leaders should master these 8 branches. So the first one, identifying the challenge. Cultivating self-awareness of your own expertise and knowing what you don't know. Clearly defining goals, framing the key issues, and generating as many alternate options and solutions as possible, which personally, that's like an area of weakness for me. I tend to be very solution-focused. So when I come up to a solution, I'm like, great, let's just do this and run with it. In the world of AI, actually, it's much more beneficial to pause and challenge yourself to not go for the first solution, but to think of the second, third, and fourth options. Prioritizing core objectives with discipline, ranking what is most important. I'm sure that everyone here has no problem prioritizing when thrown, 15,000 things. Treating AI adoption like a science experiment is another one. Defining hypotheses for a pilot program and thinking about it as, okay, we're going to test this AI solution. We're going to identify these variables, these probabilities, define what success and what failure looks like. We're great at defining success, but do we often ask ourselves, like, how will we know if this is starting to go wrong? Having that mindset will help you design pivot points in your roadmap and in your strategy to say, okay, I think that if this goes well, we're going to start to see these things. But if it's starting to not work, we're going to start to see these things, and knowing when to pause. Delegating and empowering, articulating the vision, scoping the decision guardrails, setting crystal clear expectations for your individual contributors. The next one is encouraging less dominant voices to be heard. AI is flattening hierarchies already, and it's just going to continue to do so. So knowing how to actively invite feedback and having those feedback loops in place with your team and with your stakeholders, and also pressure testing your own assumptions with your team. This is true, but is it true today as it was yesterday? Are the conditions the same? Have the conditions changed for my assumptions to be the same? Mapping out process and workflows. So we talked about this a little bit with the context of the individual contributor, but as leaders, it's not only defining what those real jobs to be done are at the macro level, it's defining the outputs very, very clearly. Cultivating psychological safety is huge. This is, encouraging people to get into the elevator because you've designed for trust. Many of us set, OKRs or goals to track our integration of AI into our workforce, but have we set goals to track experimentation, not just perfection? Normalizing failure by publishing learnings, rewarding experimentation, and blocking off and defending time for your team to test these things out. And then linking observations to patterns, which is quite literally seeing the forest for the trees. So actively looking for signals of change, anticipating implications where you can, or doing some research and talking to others. And most importantly, for a leader, connecting that agentic output to business outcomes and to value. If it's not driving revenue, saving time, or mitigating risk in the GTM world, it is ultimately just a shiny toy.
What if your next big revenue move didn't come from a blog post or a cold LinkedIn scroll, but from a real conversation with leaders who've been there?
As the world of sales is constantly evolving and constantly changing, I think it's even more critical to get together with people to understand how are they helping to solve some of the problems that our buyers have today.
Meet Emblaze, a community of sharp B2B minds, CROs, CSOs, rising stars, sharing what's actually working in sales, enablement, and customer growth.
We always find a lot of value in the partnerships that we're able to form with some of the other great organizations that are part of the team here. And personally, I love the opportunity to connect with my peer group outside of other organizations and learn from them and try to figure out if there's things that they're doing that we can pull into our organization and benefit from.
Join a monthly forum, dig into science-backed strategy, and get insight you won't find in your feed. Start your Emblaze journey today at emblazegrowth.com.
All right, so I'd like to invite you all to jump into a time machine with me and skipping ahead. So we've been, 1800s, 1927, 1945. Now we're going to fast forward to a whopping 18 months from now. And skipping ahead to think what enablement jobs might look like in the future. And I'm going to reiterate, this is just my opinion, but if I had to put money down on future jobs, I think they're going to look a lot like this. So I imagine instructional designers evolving into context architects. And what that means is that instead of building catalogs of courses and libraries, they're transferring their expertise about how adults learn, how to make information digestible, how to make learning stick, to design specialized agents. So imagine a rep is prepping for a meeting. Instead of going through their notes to refresh themselves on a competitive training that they completed, 2 months ago, a 30-minute training, they are going to go into the agent that the context architect has built to generate a 3-minute tailored video, tailored micro-learning for that rep that is tailored to the industry of the customer that they're meeting with. And it'll even go so far as to include anonymized data about a deal won earlier that week that they can pull from the CRM. So context architects will have the ability to use all of the skills that they already have at scale to make tailored, immensely relevant training at the moment of need. So truly, truly on demand. It's the ability to say, okay, as a context architect, you know what your data sources are and what the data lake is, how to bring all of that together to be useful when the rep needs it at that moment in time. I could see LMS admins becoming our future enablement engineers. When I think about what the skill sets that, a lot of LMS admins have, they're already understanding systems logic and data routing. But instead of managing SCORM files or managing users to do the work that they do today, they would be orchestrating entire workflows across systems. So think of a live pitch certification where they've connected Zoom to record a pitch, Slack to send a message to Lupin managers, and the LMS of record to track completion and scores. So as owners of the UX, they are responsible for ensuring that the learners have a seamless experience, knowing where they need to be at all times and what their next step should be. But they're also responsible for optimizing the AX or agent experience so that the agent grading the pitch has access required and the context and the data it needs to take a first pass at a scorecard. They're also responsible for setting up the human in the loop process via Slack so they can notify a manager if there's borderline results. That's what I envision LMS admins turning into. Data and reporting specialists becoming AI enablement ops. So instead of just reporting the news, telling us what it actually means, they're building dashboards that in addition to showing engagement, they're using agents to correlate directly to win rates, adjusted for seasonality, for rhythm of the business. And instead of just throwing an alert or flagging a metric, enablement ops folks use their tribal knowledge, like their awareness of a recent reorg, which is impacting team dynamics, to factor in that human element before advising on the next steps that a team needs to take. I think the best data and reporting specialists already see the story behind the number. I'm very fortunate to work with some of the best data and reporting specialists in the industry. AI enablement ops are going to be folks that are able to do this using agents at scale. I see content admins shifting into an AI governance role. So instead of policing folder permissions, they're the human in the loop for AI-generated content. They can use their expertise in content and user management to audit agent outputs, spotting logic gaps, spotting brand risks before it reaches a customer. They're essentially the safety net, the person ensuring that while the tech moves fast and information stays accurate, it is secure and human. So an agent could hallucinate a fictitious customer reference on a slide deck, but an AI governance lead would be able to catch it before it hits the field because it was either flagged by a rep or because they have quality controls and spot checks that they run at scale. They also would be the ones owning remediation paths for errors found in the wild so that they can be routed to the right SME or to the right SME agent. Internal comms, AI comms managers. Internal comms already today are the masters of brand and voice and storytelling. Now, instead of just blasting out newsletters, they would be assessing the success of multiple comms touchpoints in large-scale experiments. So determining patterns and changes of effectiveness in different strategies, like which channel works best in EMEA in the last month of the quarter. They'll be able to scale the tools that enable tailored comms. So determining how AI talks to an individual based on their individual preferences, their location, their role and tenure, in alignment with the organization's operating principles and values and philosophy. Imagine generating a super tailored personal briefing for the week that includes all of the necessary company updates that the comms person has in their pocket, but it's written in the preferred tone and in the specific context of the reader. It's taking that organizational knowledge and human empathy to the next level at scale. I think facilitators today are able to transfer that emotional intelligence that makes them great facilitators to become perfect AI adoption coaches. So instead of delivering onboarding content that they built months in advance, they could use agents built by the context architects to generate tailored day of content for the people in the room. Imagine how that would change an onboarding experience. And by doing so, they would be able to model for the people in the room how to navigate that psychological shift of working with AI, helping them unlearn old habits and normalizing failure, because it's not always going to be perfect. And after that live training, they have the opportunity to continue supporting new hires in a personalized 2-week coaching sequence on how to use AI in the organization. It's something that's executed through Slack. It could be informed by early performance signals to help those new hires ramp faster. So ultimately, contextualizing agent output with human empathy in real life. Enablement business partners. I have an incredibly talented team of enablement business partners today that have a superpower of diagnosing performance gaps and knowing how to coach a rep to win. And I think that translates perfectly into the AI sales performance coach role. But instead of shadowing live calls or joining team meetings to see how the dynamics are working, to spot like missed discovery questions or missed best practices, they can deploy those agents to listen to the first few minutes of a rep's call, detect the missed best practices, and Slack the rep a micro lesson, Slack the manager a coaching nudge, having a dashboard that inputs all this information and flags to them where and when an IRL touchpoint is actually most needed and likely to drive the maximum impact. Many folks are using tools like, for example, Gong to help manage this type of model and manage this at scale. I think it's connecting something like, for example, conversation intelligence, whether it's Gong or another tool, to the content that is being built by the context architects, to the data that you have connected from all of your other systems, and orchestrating it so that it's all a single unit. And enablement leaders are still enablement leaders. They'll map the strategy, connect it to commercial outcomes, design those pivot points, and establish a culture of psychological safety and experimentation and unlearning. And this is honestly what excites me the most. I don't see these jobs being replaced. They're evolving. They are infinitely more strategic, infinitely more creative, and infinitely more human. So you could say that AI is our new microphone in Hollywood. It's our push button elevator. It's our forest. We can either stick to learning the tools one at a time and wait to see how AI is transforming our world, or we can be stewards of a human-first agentic landscape. You'll hear me say that I think the future belongs to those who can see the forest for the trees and keeping the human in the loop and getting incredibly crisp on the job to be done. And I truly believe that if we do that, we're going to master this shift together and do some incredible things. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you for the time. And I think we've got a couple of minutes left.
I promised everybody when we started that this was going to be the moment that AI came to the forefront of this day together, and you left no doubt. What is the individual contributor going to look like in a world of AI? What is the manager going to look like in a world of AI? And what's your enablement team going to look like in a world of AI? One of the things I called out and people liked was the idea that this job begets or becomes this job. So the only thing, I couldn't take notes fast enough. So maybe the one update to that slide would be, what seat are they in now that they would be destined for this? But the one thing that kept coming up was like, yeah, but do you need 1 for 1? Or is it going to be 5 for 1? One person does 5 of those things. What do you see in terms of that rationalization?
It can absolutely be. And this goes back to when you look at that map of the skills for an individual contributor or for a leader. If you are a one-person enablement team, that's how you have to operate within an organization. Then you need to prioritize of those 6 skills, which are the ones that you're going to lean into the most, or which are the ones that the organization is demanding the most of. If your main focus is content management, you're in a keep the lights on model. You're managing content, you're managing programs, and you're managing stakeholders. With those 3 things, you would go back to the map of skill that I've listed and say, okay, well, I need to be very good at identifying the challenge. I need to be very good at workflow orchestration, and I need to be very good at governance. And based off of that, you map out what your profile looks like.
So you said at the beginning that to some degree, this is your opinion as you are working these things in your organization. You're talking to others like you, and you're seeing many other organizations. What have you prioritized personally? Like, which of these things are happening first that you believe lowest hanging fruit and noticeable impact that will then create more interest in the next?
So I'm actually just starting with the core principles. That's where I'm spending the majority of my time is, are we crisp on the job to be done? Does everyone in my team really understand what their job to be done is? Are we focusing on the overall strategy versus are we spending a ton of time and all of our energy just learning how to use, Claude Code? And then how are we keeping the human in the loop? So that's where I'm spending most of my time, is just encouraging my team to think that through in their day-to-day. That said, personally, I was hoping to have it ready for today, but I couldn't quite get there. I vibe coded a quiz that lets you answer these questions for yourself based off of your reflection of how you are approaching the work, and gives you a recommendation of where you should be spending a little bit more time.
Do you have a before AI and after AI description for the ELT? I don't know. I'd be one way to think about it.
Honestly, I'm just sharing this presentation with them, and I'm sharing the map. Also, one of the things that we're needing to do better, that we honestly have not done effectively yet, is connecting the dots with the people team much more broadly. I don't know, in many organizations that, in my experience, we tend to start operating very much in the GTM work very, very quickly and then scale out. For something like this, I think it actually needs to be much more global. It needs to be organization-wide, just an agreement and consensus and mindset of, we are going to reward experimentation. We are going to protect people's time to do this. We are going to help them map out. Their job is like this today. As an organization, we're going to align on, this is your job to be done, and this is what it could look like afterwards.
That's awesome. Well, that is a lot to take in. I'm just going to be honest. So I want to thank you for that, for taking the tough task today of prognosticating in a world that is unprecedentedly unpredictable, is what I just said earlier. Yet we're being challenged to be more predictable in light of all of that. And you helped at least put some form to all of these possibilities.
Another amazing episode. Thank you so much, Marcela, for sharing your story. Thank you, Tim Reister. And thank you to you for watching or listening on your favorite podcast platform. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, rate, and review the show so that other revenue leaders and aspiring ones can find it. Check out what Emblaze membership is all about by going to corporatevisions.com/community. We would love to have you with us. See you next time.